Welcome to Customer Driven with Chad McDaniel. Well known throughout the customer leadership industry, Chad has been the chief community leader for Execs in the Know, one of the top executive customer advocacy groups on the planet. With a passion for customer success and a desire to share and develop best practices, Chad's conversations with industry leaders aim to give unfiltered, unplugged access to industry peers who are customer obsessed, just like you. If you enjoy the show, please be sure to rate and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and Spotify. Now here's your host, Chad McDaniel.
Well, welcome to all of our listeners to another outstanding episode of Customer Driven with Chad McDaniel. Thank you for your listenership, and it's just been a great series, a Customer Driven podcast series, just because we literally cover everything from A to Z that is around customer design and customer outcomes, success, customer experience, anything that evolves around your end customer and their satisfaction. And if you're not a subscriber to Customer Driven, I really encourage you to get involved. You can simply subscribe on iTunes or other platforms that we broadcast from. And again, I love your feedback. So if you, from today's episode, could be so kind and continue to leave your comments and feedback and suggestions, I greatly would appreciate it. But we're in early December. It's been a very busy day. I was in a webinar earlier today, hosting a webinar around operationalizing customer experience with analytics to deliver better business outcome. Really, really good conversation with the group of people we had on there. And then tomorrow I'm heading to Seattle. We're going to be conducting our next outsourcing briefing up in Redmond at Microsoft's location, and I'm looking for that and getting ready for the holidays. Couple weeks out, and then really ready to recharge for 2019. So with this, today's episode is I'd like to really focus on understanding customer lifetime value and why it's important. And I brought a very special guest, a gentleman I've known for a number of years that I think very highly of, and I know he brings a strong pedigree of discipline and background in this industry. And I'll be introducing Mike Nessler here as our guest very shortly. But the title for the episode, Understanding Customer Lifetime Value and Why It's Important. So why is it important? And what is the correlation with customer experience, retention, satisfaction, customer effort? And how does this all play into the role of the contact center and beyond? And I really was pleased that I could get some of Mike's time, Mike to come out and help educate myself, our listeners, our audience. You guys are the best audience, by the way. You're so engaged and involved and loyal to Execs in the Know, and I cannot thank you enough for that. And for those that are new to Execs in the Know, by gosh darn it, go to our website, execsintheknow.com. We are a brand peer-to-peer sharing community and group of just phenomenal insights and best practice sharing. And execsintheknow.com, you can find out a lot of details on us. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and jump in and introduce our guest here. Mike Nessler is the CEO of Argo Contact Centers, an ITC capital company. And before this, Mike was with Intercall for 12 years. Again, I'll let Mike give a little bit more background to these organizations. And I am not a fan of reading bios, and I like guests to introduce themselves. So, Mike, we've got a very important topic that I think is going to resonate very well with our listeners today. To set the stage, Mike, please introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about the company, your background, and we're going to get started.
Super. Thanks, Chad. So I'm today running a company called Argo Contact Center. It's a small niche provider in the BPO space. This is a company with ITC funding we acquired a little over a year ago with the intention to grow this and build a nice niche regional U.S. local presence within the BPO space. As you stated, I spent 12 years at Intercall, and Intercall is one of the largest conferencing and collaboration companies. So played a very senior level role there, running technology, running operations, basically doing a little bit of everything with the exception of marketing over that 12-year period. And before that, a number of years at AT&T and Convergys. So that's a little on my background. Played senior roles in a number of different organizations. I've had the experience of managing outsourced service as well as creating and building service as a practice across a business without outsourcing it, actually doing all the work ourselves.
So, Mike, you've ran some roles both on the buy side and the supplier side. Is that correct over your career span?
Correct. Both sides.
Okay. Yeah, I was just wanting to make sure, and I believe that was correct, and I wanted to confirm for our listeners. And again, if you'd like to learn more about Mike Nessler, our guest today on Customer Driven, you can find him on LinkedIn. Just look under Mike Nessler, Nessler, and you'll find our show guest here. So, Mike, I'm going to jump right in, and thank you for that that introduction and background, and coming on our show today to help our listeners. So, with the lens of your background and the industries you've been involved in, what do you see as some of the ways that change needs to take place around how customer experience is planned and managed? Let's start there.
I think it's a great question. And this is a time of the year when folks are going through the budgeting process, planning for the next year. And I think back to many of the budget exercises that I've been through in my career. And when you think about a lot of those budgeting exercises, folks tend to focus within the compartmental function that they're part of, and they manage the build of a budget tied to what they do, whether it's in product management, whether it's in operations, whether it's in contact center, whether it's in technology. And I think when I think about some of the gaps around customer experience and how to drive better customer experience, I think budgeting is a key area where there has to be more cross-functional focus. There's got to be that alignment between technology and operations and product and marketing and sales and the contact center, and you've got to design and create a customer experience that takes into consideration all the different pieces from the different organizations. And that's got to be budgeted, it's got to be planned, it's got to be structured in such a way that you're thinking about the customer across every function, and it's linked across every function.
And I subscribe to that. I'm wondering, Mike, do you feel in organizations that it's an afterthought, or we're just busy in the day to day and we're not thinking that through as far as why are some of these things not getting on the line items or budgeted or planned or structured? Sounds simple on paper. I know it can be hard, but what do you think some of the reasons that may not be occurring?
I think it's a lot of cross-functional effort, to be very honest. When you think about it and you budget based upon the function that you manage. And you have vice presidents and you have senior vice presidents and you have senior levels in each of these functions that care for their budget, their people, their spend, the work that they do. And they don't always sync up with their peer group and the different functions in the organization to plan cross-functionally. It's not something that's done as naturally as maybe it should be. I think one of the keys to drive some of that change is it's got to be driven by definition of the customer experience that you want to drive within your organization first. That design is critical. And then that design should drive your capital spend. It should drive your budgets function by function. And as you do that, you tend to better align product, features, services, quality, with all the things that you do within the call center to establish all the baseline processes, all the right metrics to ensure that you can serve that customer cross-functionally the way that they need to be served. It's a lot of work, Chad. This is not something that's easily done. And if I think back to some of my experience in my past with budgeting, you have somebody at a very senior level, looks at customer service spend. I need you to cut 5-10% of the spend year over year. So what do? You end up solving that problem as you craft your budget for the next year. you haven't really worked through all the details tied to the experience. And is cutting that cost going to decrease customer stickiness? Is cutting that cost going to focus you on areas other than driving growth and generating happy customers? So I think some of the drivers in the budgeting process drive individuals function by function to think about things in a very short-term oriented way, as opposed to thinking about the technology investments, the experience as a whole, the processes as a whole, the policies as a whole, and linking that together into a cohesive whole that gives you a customer experience that drives high NPS, high customer satisfaction, growth in revenue, and stickiness in the relationship.
So, Mike, there's no question you are a component of lifetime value management of a customer. It has to be planned, and design is critical. Can you tell me a little bit about how you have thought about or managed lifetime value in your just sort of career history, and any nuggets of insights and takeaways that may be useful for the audience that gives them a place to start too?
The first thing that I think about is I think about what contacts are really valuable contacts that you have with your customers. You have contacts that aren't valuable, tied to an issue, a problem. If you handle it well, it opens a door. And we know that that takes place as you manage customer relationships. But we have to know which contacts we have with customers are really valuable. And we need to maximize the value of those contacts with the agents that support those customers and with the technology that enables those people. And at the product level itself, one of the experiences that I had some years ago is we spent some time on product design. We spent time on features, functions of the product, really focused initially on product management. So we spent the time on the product and all the different components of the product. And as we dealt with orders, as we dealt with reservations, we had a different set of features and functions that we could easily sell in the midst of those contacts. So one of the things that I've seen in the past is product design gives you the ability, if you do it well and you link it to what you do within the contact center, you can drive a stickier relationship. You can sell more features. You can sell more subscriptions. You can generate more revenue on a per transaction basis if you think about things first from the product standpoint before you think about what you're going to do in the contact center to handle that subscription or handle that call. An example that I'm raising here, I remember a product in my days at Intercall that we increased feature revenue by 20%, and our profitability went up well over that percentage point because those features generated high value and customers were willing to pay higher prices for some of those features. So I think you got to think about this in some instances at the product level, at the subscription level, at the feature level, and you got to align that with your reservation and your ordering process so that you can teach, you can educate customers, and you can sell that value around that product to the customer in the midst of those transactions. It makes for stickier relationships, it makes for more revenue and more growth, and it diversifies the revenue that you do generate from your customers as you do that.
So for our listeners, you're listening to Mike Nessler, the CEO of Argo Contact Centers, today, joining as our guest, and it's a pleasure to have you, Mike. And we could probably get into a whole conversation about what contacts with the customer are valuable, or how do you deal with contacts that don't drive value. But I want to kind of move past that for a moment and go into metrics that matter. And a lot of it is about defining and measurement. I hear a lot around that. And I'd love to get your perspective around what I'm saying, metrics that matter from your perspective.
No, it's a great point. And as you know, I've spent a lot of time in my past around balanced scorecard and metrics and process. And, using enabling technology to drive end result. Metrics are, I think, extraordinarily important in everything that we do, but the metrics have to be aligned function by function. I brought this up a little bit earlier around customer experience. Every function in the organization has to have the right metrics within that function to support customer experience. Customer experience isn't managed only in the contact center. Customer experience is managed through product design, it's managed through how you sell it, how you service it, through everything that you do within the organization. So when I hear folks talk about SLAs and I hear folks talk about 80-20 and handle times, those are all important metrics. But what's most important is the impact that the customer experience has on lifetime value. It has on the revenue that you generate from those customers, the retention level of those customers. So the revenue-related metrics, the growth-related metrics, the stickiness-related metrics, and how those all tie back to processes in your organization, whether it be technology supported or people supported, I think are the areas where you really need to focus. The typical contact center metrics, those are basic. They need to be in place. You need to manage them, but they have to align with more of these very important impact metrics around revenue, growth, stickiness, value, and CSAT.
And I think it's interesting. I'd love to get from our listeners at any time, if you want to email me, chad@execsintheknow.com. When we think of customer lifetime value and everything around the entire equation of customer success and effort, what are the key things you are measuring? There's no right or wrongs. It just would be great to hear and get some of your insights there and see how that's mapping up with the ways others are approaching that piece of it. And I think, Mike, that, how to enable these results, you probably got a function. I think you mentioned a lot about cross-functionality. And then it sounds like it's a constant feedback and refinement sort of looping. And first of all, do you agree with that, or would you have a different way that you would say that?
Oh, I would agree with you completely. And you probably remember from way back when some of the training that I had at AT&T and that we talked about years and years ago about plan, do, check, act. And that's that whole cycle of planning something, doing it, checking it, and then continuing to refine. I think that's an important process. So those listening posts in the organization, listening to what the customer is saying, seeing the results, using those results across every function to drive change is extremely important. I'll give you an experience that I had, probably 5-6 years ago. We did a lot with NPS when I was at Intercall. And when we first started to work on NPS, our NPS scores were okay, they were fair, but over a 3-year period, we changed the MBO process. We aligned specific metrics within every function that tied back to customer experience. When we did a survey and we got feedback, the folks within these different functions got feedback on performance, and then they had to act on the results to drive improvement almost real time. We took our NPS scores using that real-time alignment of listening posts to MBOs to functions. We drove our NPS scores from the 20s. We got up to over 70 with certain products, and all products we were over 50. And as you know, that's a very high set of NPS scores. And I think there's only one reason why it took place. We aligned objectives, we aligned metrics. The listening post provided feedback constantly to the different people in the organization, and they were expected to act when something didn't work the way that it was supposed to and fix it. And then we aligned our capital structure for investment in CRM, in channels, in media, in different technology to automate, to take manual process and eliminate. We aligned all that tied to what we tried to do from a customer experience standpoint. But I think the most important piece of what we did was listening posts, aligning the results with MBOs across every function, and driving action across every function to get the end result that was important.
So there would be some pieces I'd want to ask you in regards to technology and people and other performance management incentives. But from the technology critical, that the technology has to be aligned across the organization. Are there any key principles that the technology has to drive within the business? And, what do you see as maybe some of those key principles with the technology hat on?
So as you know, I ran technology at Intercall for some years, and I think it's really, really important to make sure every bit of technology that you have in place is integrated. It all has to work well together. You need to be able to pull data and analytics from all the different pieces of the solutions that are in place. We all know that there are lots of different point solutions. Some of them are more full featured than others. Some of it's integrated, some of it isn't, but it has to be number one integrated. And we have to make sure that what we have in place is being used. At the same time, I've seen this, I've done it, I've made the mistake of it, of putting new technology in place without making sure that we've done everything we needed to do to streamline the customer experience in the first place. So you've got to start with process. What's the process? What's the experience need to look like? How does the technology and all the layers of the technology get aligned to support that experience? Make sure you're using the tech, make sure it's integrated, make sure it's aligned. Listen to what your customers hear from that technology. Because I've gone through that at different points in the past where I've listened to different IVRs and speech solutions and how it all bridges into a live rep at some point, or it bridges into chat, or it bridges into some other self-service engine, so on and so forth. Sometimes the technology gets too layered. There's too much of it, and it's not streamlined enough. So I think one of the other things you got to think about in the midst of all this, it's enabling technology. It's got to support the experience that you want. It's got to be streamlined, and you've got to make sure that the right layers in place are there. You're not just adding layers to reduce costs. You're adding layers to augment experience.
There's been a lot of conversation around, I would say, technology and the emerging technologies. And the point of this particular podcast is not necessarily to go and look at automation and a lot of the components around it. But do you feel, Mike, where do you see things right now from the people equation and agent effort and agent satisfaction, and where does the human side of this play into this conversation, do you believe?
It's a great question. As I kind of think about it, there's a number of newer technologies that have become available. Hiring and recruiting and selection software that you can use. You can use video. You can message back and forth throughout the process. There's new great technology around LMS, whether it is just on-demand, typical multi-day training down to micro training. There are other tools that can get used to message individuals across the organization. I like to talk about those technologies are as enablers of our people. And I think what we've got to think about when we think about our folks, we've got to align all that enabling technology, the recruiting, the selection, the hiring tech, with the LMS technology, with the career planning technology, with everything that we do to train day in, day out, everything we do to message day in, day out, how it ties into quality systems. And we use quality and quality metrics to help identify training paths within the LMS platform and to push content to our reps real time to drive constant improvement. I think when you take all that technology and you link it together and you get all common reporting, it gives you the ability to better assess your people and give them the tools so that they can do what they need to service your customers. So we've spent a lot of time in my past role at Intercall, and we're doing a lot these days at Argo to tie together LMS, Everything you can do with training, everything you can do with recruiting, hiring, selection, all the messaging that we do with our representatives to constantly educate them, how it ties into our quality systems and all of those metrics, to push content to smartphones, to push content to our reps at their desktop so that they can continue to improve. And one of the things that I've seen in my past, if you're feeding your people with good content to educate them, to help them get better, and that's aligned with the performance management systems that you have in the organization, you're going to get a better end result. You're going to get better and happier people supporting your customers. So I think there's going to be more emphasis linking together all those enabling technologies. I'm really not talking about Switch and CRM and AI and BI. I'm talking about all the things that enable our people to learn, to manage their performance, and eventually manage their pay through their great performance and how it affects our customers.
I really agree and subscribe to what you just said. And, I really feel that we as leaders, we need to spend some more time talking about that agent experience and agent outcome and their success. And I know we do that in different pockets, but I think it needs to become much more vocal. And I'd love to hear from some brands on what you're doing in that regard. Mike, with the little bit of time we have left, I just want to throw a couple things in and a little bit towards the future, but do you feel the complexity or the skill requirements, are we going to be increasing, decreasing? What do you see over the next, let's say, 3 years?
I see contacts getting more and more complex. If you think about, if you design your service processes well, you're using the right enabling technology to take the simple contacts and manage them using the technology. Our reps are going to be handling more and more complex transactions as time goes on. We have to spend more time educating them, and we have to spend more time doing real-time education so that they can constantly learn day in, day out. The days of somebody going into training for 6 weeks, getting on the floor and being great, I think are over. We got to give short bursts of constant training to our reps because products are changing so often, and being able to gather the data that we're able to real time on performance, we need to align our training system, our performance management systems, so that our reps constantly get information to improve their performance as they deal with customers. And I think that means an alignment of our quality systems and how that ties into our LMS, how it ties into micro training, how it ties into things that we push to our reps constantly to make them better.
Couldn't agree more. I'm really glad this is being recorded so our listeners can go back and listen to some of the examples and thoughts here, Mike. The micro training absolutely I think is going to be key, and again something that I'd love to hear more ideas and examples of what people are doing in that area. If you happen to be listening to this podcast, please reach out to Chad at execsintheknow.com. So Mike, I want to leave it with this. What would you want to leave the listeners from today's episode? What are the key things or the takeaways, or just in a quick summary, what do you want to kind of make sure our listeners get from this episode?
You get what you design. And I'll say that again, you get what you design. So design that customer experience to generate value. Think about the technology, think about the processes, gather feedback from customers, learn and align everything to enable the customer experience that you want to generate. If you plan it, you align it, you'll generate the results. With that, put the right metrics in place and put the right impact metrics in place across the organization. If you're looking at this just from the contact center, you're looking too narrow. Think about this from product to marketing to sales to operations to every function in the organization. There's got to be proper alignment around the design and around the overall performance to generate the end results that you're looking for. Technology is going to enable the design. Keep that in mind. It can't be technology for technology's sake. Technology has to be aligned with design. And you got to think about this from a multi-year standpoint. One of the things I learned at Intercall is you can't deal with changes in billing systems, CRM systems, reporting systems, dealing with self-service, dealing with manual transactions to automate them. You can't do it overnight. You have to have multi-year plans that tie to a design. And if you do that, you can be successful. If you try to do it one budget cycle, get everything done within 1 year, you're going to fail. Make sure that your plans are aligned in a multi-year way, and it's all tied to a tight design, and you learn and you constantly drive improvement using the metrics that you have.
Well, you've heard it first from Mike Nessler. You get what you design. And Mike, you've been a tremendous guest, and thank you again, and wish you all the best in the continued success of your organization and your personal leadership. And you've been a huge advocate in this industry for a number of years, and just keep that push and motivation going on. For our listeners, thank you for another episode of Customer Driven. I really would love you to subscribe or leave comments on today's episode. Your feedback is paramount to me, and hearing your thoughts and ideas and design towards these podcasts. My goal is to give you straight, unfiltered feedback from our various guests of what they're thinking and what's on their mind as we're kind of heading into 2019. There are a number of ways you can get involved with Execs in the Know. Our next national leadership event, please mark your calendars, is going to be February 4th to the 6th. We're going to be in New Orleans. It is a fantastic 2 days of just action-packed speakers and small group discussions and insights, everything around the customer. So on behalf of myself, Chad McDaniel, I really want to say thank you for your listenership. Have a great day, and continue to keep customer at the center of your effort.
Thank you for listening to Customer Driven with Chad McDaniel. If you enjoyed the show, please be sure to rate and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and Spotify. It really makes a difference in helping others find the podcast. For more information on our customer experience community, please visit execsintheknow.com.